Don't bother with the old woman. She's only the janitor, my daughter-in-law said coldly. I had been counting the days to this trip as if they were beads on a rosary, each one whispered with hope. At 72, time felt different. Thinner, more precious. Moments with my son Jay and his family were rare now, scattered holidays and hurried phone calls, so when he suggested a week in Miami, my heart lifted in a way it hadn't for years. I told myself this would be different. I told myself this was my chance to finally feel like I belonged again. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. The drive took 4 hours, but it felt longer because I spent most of it invisible. Jay and his wife Valentina talked over me as though I were part of the car's upholstery, not a living, breathing woman sitting in the back seat. They discussed spa appointments, designer boutiques, afternoon teas, and exclusive dinners, laughing and planning with an ease that left no space for me. Every so often I tried to join in, asking about the kids or suggesting something simple we could do together, but my words landed softly and disappeared. Valentina would answer with clipped politeness, Jay wouldn't answer at all, and the conversation would roll on without me. I noticed it, of course. I always did. But I wanted this trip to work so badly that I ignored the ache building behind my ribs. I told myself families were complicated, that patience mattered, that love meant enduring discomfort. I had endured far worse in my life, hadn't I? The coastal paradise resort appeared like a dream against the bright Florida sky, all glass and greenery, elegance and sunlight. As we pulled up to the entrance, something warm stirred in my chest, a familiar pride I kept carefully hidden. This place was one of my greatest accomplishments, though my family had no idea. I had built my hotel business from nothing after my husband died, starting with a single struggling bed and breakfast. I scrubbed floors, handled reservations, learned accounting late at night, and worked 18-hour days until my hands ached and my eyes burned. Over decades, that one property became 17, spread across 3 states. I never told Jay the truth. I wanted him to love me as his mother, not as a source of wealth. Valentina adjusted her oversized sunglasses as the valet opened the door. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her posture practiced and confident. She had a beauty that came from money and attention, the kind that demanded to be noticed. At 35, she was 20 years younger than Jay, and she liked everyone to remember it. I want the penthouse, she said firmly as we stepped toward the doors. I don't care what they say about availability. Just make it happen. Jay nodded instantly, as if the matter were already settled. Watching him defer to her still surprised me, even after 5 years of marriage. The independent boy I raised alone seemed to have vanished, replaced by a man who needed permission to breathe. The lobby was just as I remembered it. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, chandeliers catching the light, the low hum of conversations and rolling suitcases. Jasmine, the front desk manager, looked up and froze when she saw me. Recognition flashed across her face, followed quickly by understanding when I gave her a subtle shake of my head. Not yet. I wasn't ready. She smiled professionally and greeted us. Jay gave his name, already sounding impatient. Jasmine typed quickly, then looked up again. Your reservation is confirmed for our Coastal Paradise Deluxe Suite, she said calmly. However, the penthouse is fully booked for the duration of your stay. Valentina's pleasant mask cracked instantly. Her jaw tightened, her eyes sharp beneath layers of makeup. That's unacceptable, she snapped. Do you know who we are? Jasmine kept her composure, though I saw tension in her shoulders. I apologize for any misunderstanding, Mrs. Carter. The deluxe suite is one of our finest rooms. I don't want to hear about second-rate rooms, Valentina interrupted, her voice rising. Heads turned. Phones appeared. I want the penthouse. I stepped forward, hoping to calm things before they spiraled. Valentina, maybe we could. She spun toward me, fury distorting her features. Don't you dare speak, she shouted, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. Ignore her. She's just the help. The words hit like ice water. My face burned as whispers rippled through the room. She's nothing, Valentina continued, pointing at me. Just a servant. Don't waste your time on her. I stood frozen, heart pounding, my mouth dry. I had been insulted before in my life, underestimated, dismissed, but never like this. Never by family. Never in public. Then Jay laughed. Not an awkward laugh. Not an uncomfortable one. A real laugh, full and unrestrained. Oh, Valentina, he said, wiping his eyes. You're terrible. Mom, just go sit down somewhere. Let us handle this. Something inside me fractured quietly. This was my son. The boy who once called me the strongest woman alive. And he was laughing while I was torn apart. Jasmine's face had gone pale. I could see sympathy there, and something else, anger restrained by professionalism. She knew exactly who I was. With one word from me, everything could end. Instead, I picked up my suitcase. I walked toward the elevator with my back straight, each step heavy with humiliation. Behind me, Valentina continued to argue loudly, her entitlement echoing off marble walls. When the elevator doors closed, I met Jasmine's eyes one last time. She gave me a small, solemn nod. The ride up felt endless. Each passing floor stirred memories of the years I had spent building this empire. Negotiations, renovations, sleepless nights. And yet here I was, reduced to nothing in my own house. That night, I barely slept. The ocean view should have soothed me, but my thoughts were too loud. Valentina's voice replayed over and over. Jay's laughter hurt even more. By morning, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. Jay knocked on my door early. Valentina wants breakfast, he said, already turning away. Then you'll watch the kids. No apology. No acknowledgement. At breakfast, Valentina ordered the staff around with practiced cruelty. My grandchildren barely looked at me. When one of them asked if it was true I used to clean houses, something deep inside me went still. By the time I found myself sitting by the pool hours later, watching other families laugh together, the truth finally settled in my bones. I hadn't been invited on this trip to be loved. I had been brought to be used. And I was done pretending not to see it. The sun was already high when I found myself seated at the edge of the pool, the heat pressing against my skin as if it were trying to seep into my bones. Laughter floated through the air from families splashing in the water, parents calling out reminders, children shrieking with joy. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like salt in an open wound. Zuri and Deshawn sat beside me on lounge chairs, their small faces illuminated by the glow of their tablets, fingers swiping endlessly. They barely noticed me unless I spoke first, and even then their attention drifted away as quickly as it arrived. I watched them quietly, trying to reconcile the children before me with the babies I remembered holding years ago. Back then, they had clutched my fingers with surprising strength, their tiny hands warm and trusting. Now, there was distance in their eyes, a polite indifference that felt rehearsed. I wondered how much of it was simply age and how much had been carefully taught. "Grandma," Zuri said suddenly, not looking up. My heart lifted despite myself. "Mom says you used to clean houses for rich people. Is that true?" The question landed softly but cut deeply. I took a slow breath, steadying myself before answering. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "I'm a business owner. I build hotels." Deshawn looked up then, his brow furrowed. "Mom says you make that stuff up because you're ashamed of being poor." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words echoed inside my head, heavy and sharp. Poor. Ashamed. A liar. I had faced skepticism and doubt in boardrooms full of men who assumed I didn't belong, but hearing it echoed through my grandchildren's voices felt like a betrayal of a different kind. "That isn't true," I said finally, keeping my voice calm. "I've worked very hard my whole life." Zuri shrugged, already losing interest. "That's not what Mom says." And just like that, the conversation ended. They returned to their screens, leaving me alone with the weight of what had just been revealed. Valentina hadn't just dismissed me, she had rewritten my entire existence, turning me into a cautionary tale of failure and delusion. Worse, she had taught my grandchildren to see me that way too. Hours passed slowly. I reapplied sunscreen, handed out water bottles, and watched the clock inch forward. Other guests struck up small conversations with me, commenting on the weather or the beauty of the resort. I smiled and responded politely, but inside I felt hollow. Each passing minute reinforced the truth I had been avoiding. I was not here as family. I was here as free labor. When Jay and Valentina finally returned that afternoon, they looked refreshed and glowing, as if they had spent the day in another world entirely. Valentina's nails were freshly done, her hair flawless. Jay smelled faintly of expensive cologne and wine. How were the kids? Jay asked absently, his eyes already drifting toward his phone. They were fine, I said. It was the easiest answer. Good, Valentina replied. You can watch them again tomorrow. We're playing golf in the morning. That night, alone in my room, I sat by the window and watched the moonlight shimmer across the water. I thought about the life I had built, the sacrifices I had made, and the way it had all been reduced to nothing more than a joke behind my back. I realized then that silence had become my prison. Every time I swallowed my hurt to keep the peace, I gave them permission to treat me as less. The next morning began no differently. Valentina handed me instructions as if she were assigning tasks to an employee. Lunch at noon. Snacks rationed. Sunscreen applied on schedule. Jay added details without ever looking at me. As they prepared to leave for the day, I overheard Valentina speaking on the phone in a hushed, syrupy tone. No, we can't have dinner tonight. I'm stuck with the kids. It's ridiculous, I know. Just a few more days and it'll be sorted. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. Sorted. As if I were a problem to be solved, not a person. After they left, I took Zuri and Deshawn to the kids' club. The counselors welcomed them warmly, and for the first time since we arrived, I saw genuine smiles on their faces. Laughter bubbled up as they joined other children, free from screens and rules. I lingered for a moment, watching them, feeling both relief and sadness. With unexpected time to myself, I wandered the property slowly. I passed gardens I had personally approved, pathways I had walked during renovations, spaces shaped by my vision and labor. Seeing it all through the eyes of a guest stirred a mix of pride and melancholy. It was near the pool bar that everything changed. I recognized Jay's voice first, then Valentina's. They were supposed to be miles away at wineries, but there they were, seated in a private cabana with another couple. I paused behind a palm tree, my heart beginning to race. She's getting old, Valentina was saying casually. Old people don't last forever. A laugh followed. Another voice chimed in, amused. You're awful. I'm realistic, Valentina replied. Jay's an only child. Everything will be ours eventually. And your mother? A man asked. Does she have anything of her own? I held my breath. My mom. Jay scoffed. She's broke. Lives in a tiny apartment. I help her out. The lie settled over me like a shroud. Years of financial support, quietly given, erased with a sentence. That's why this trip is so annoying, Valentina continued. Dragging her around because she can't afford anything. It's like having a pathetic pet. They laughed. Casually. Easily. I pressed my hand to my mouth, fighting the urge to cry out. Each word stripped away another layer of illusion. They weren't tolerating me. They were waiting me out. Once she needs real care, Valentina added, she's going straight into a home. I'm not sacrificing my life for some useless old woman. Jay agreed without hesitation. She still thinks she's important, he said mockingly. Tells these stories about owning businesses. It's embarrassing. Their laughter followed me as I stumbled away, my vision blurred by tears. In that moment, something inside me hardened. The pain was still there, raw and aching, but it was joined by clarity. They thought I was nothing. They were wrong. And for the first time in years, I stopped wondering how to earn their love and started wondering how to reclaim my dignity. I don't remember how long I stood there after their laughter faded, hidden behind that palm tree as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. The world around me continued as if nothing had happened. Music from the pool speakers, glasses clinking at the bar, the rhythmic splash of water, but I felt detached from it all, like I had stepped outside my own body. My hands were trembling. My chest felt tight, each breath shallow and deliberate. What hurt most wasn't Valentina. Cruel people had crossed my path before. I had learned long ago that entitlement often came wrapped in beauty and charm. What broke me was Jay. My son. The child I had raised alone after his father died. The boy who used to sleep curled against my side during storms because he said my heartbeat made him feel safe. Hearing his voice twisted with mockery, hearing him reduce my life to a pitiful fantasy, was like losing him all over again. I walked slowly back toward the kids' club, my legs heavy, my thoughts racing. With every step, memories surfaced unbidden. Packing his lunches before dawn, sitting through school plays half asleep after working all night, saving every spare dollar so he could go to college without debt. I had done it gladly. Love to me had always meant sacrifice. I never imagined that sacrifice could be used as a weapon against me. When I reached the kids' club, Zuri and Deshawn were laughing with other children, their faces bright and carefree. Seeing them like that steadied me. Whatever else Valentina had done, she hadn't yet stolen their ability to feel joy. I signed them out and took them down to the beach, needing air, space, something real beneath my feet. The sand was warm, the ocean calm. I left my phone and purse on a towel and let the children run. We built sandcastles together, awkward at first, then with growing enthusiasm. I showed them how to reinforce the walls with wet sand, how to carve tiny doorways with seashells. For a little while, they forgot their screens. They laughed when waves knocked down our creations, and I laughed with them. It felt almost like healing, even though I knew it was temporary. As the sun began to set, casting the sky in gold and pink, I felt a quiet resolve settle over me. I had spent years being careful, staying silent, choosing peace over truth. It had earned me nothing but disrespect. The realization was painful, but it was also freeing. I didn't owe anyone my silence anymore. That evening, Jay and Valentina returned to the suite, flushed with sun and wine. They didn't notice the change in me at first. Valentina spoke briskly about dinner plans, about a new restaurant she wanted to try, assuming I would step aside and take the kids as usual. I stood in the doorway and didn't move. "We're heading out," she said, glancing at her watch. "You can put them to bed." "No," I said quietly. She frowned, annoyed. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean you won't be going out tonight," I replied. "And you won't be staying here tomorrow." Jay looked up sharply. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I heard you," I said, meeting his eyes. "Everything." For a moment, there was silence. Then Valentina laughed sharply. "You were spying on us?" "I was listening," I said. "To my own son discuss my death as if it were a scheduling inconvenience." Jay's face drained of color. "Mom, you're misunderstanding. I own this hotel," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "And every other coastal paradise property." Valentina's expression shifted from irritation to disbelief. "That's not funny." "It wasn't meant to be," I replied. I called the front desk, my hand no longer shaking. Jasmine arrived with security within minutes. When she confirmed my identity aloud, founder, owner, sole decision-maker, the room seemed to tilt. Valentina's bravado collapsed into panic. Jay stared at the papers I handed him, records of years of financial support, proof he could not deny. For the first time, he looked at me not as a burden, but as someone he had profoundly underestimated. "You lied to me," he said to Valentina, his voice cracking. She rounded on him instantly. "She's manipulating you. She's always done that." No, I said calmly. I stayed silent. You filled in the rest. The consequences unfolded quickly after that. Their charges were transferred to their card. Their stay was terminated. Security waited politely but firmly. Valentina screamed. Jay pleaded. Neither of them changed my mind. When the door finally closed behind them, the silence felt sacred. That night, I slept deeply without dreams. In the days that followed, I spent time with people who treated me with kindness and respect. I walked the property freely, spoke with staff, shared meals without fear of being dismissed. I called a lawyer. I updated my will. I made decisions I had postponed for too long. Most importantly, I began to forgive myself. Not them. Myself. For believing that love required me to disappear. By the time the trip ended, I was no longer the woman who had arrived hopeful and afraid. I was myself again, strong, capable, whole. And I understood something I wish I had learned sooner. Dignity is not something others give you. It is something you must claim, even when it costs you people you thought you couldn't live without. The morning after they left, I woke before dawn, the way I always did when something important was about to change. The room was quiet, the ocean still dark beyond the glass, waves rolling in slow, patient rhythms. For the first time since arriving, my chest didn't feel tight. The ache was still there, but it had softened, transformed into something steadier, resolve. I brewed myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the horizon slowly brighten. For decades, my life had been governed by responsibility. To my child, to my employees, to the businesses I had built with my own hands. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that responsibility to myself mattered too. I had mistaken endurance for love, silence for grace. Now, in the quiet aftermath of everything that had happened, I finally allowed myself to grieve. Not just for the betrayal, but for the years I had spent shrinking to make others comfortable. The resort began to wake as the sun rose. Staff moved through the halls with quiet efficiency, greeting me warmly when they saw me. Their respect was effortless, genuine. It reminded me who I was when I wasn't trying to earn affection from people determined not to give it. Later that morning, I met with Jasmine in her office. She brought coffee and pastries, but more importantly, she brought honesty. We spoke not just about the incident, but about operations, about improvements she'd been wanting to suggest for months. I listened, took notes, and asked questions. I felt alive again, engaged in the work that had once given me purpose. When we finished, she hesitated. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for what you went through." "So am I replied. "But not for standing up for myself." The rest of the day passed in a blur of small decisions and long walks. I visited the kids' club one last time, leaving behind a generous donation for new supplies. I spent an hour at the spa, not as an indulgence, but as a reminder that care wasn't something I had to earn. I sat on the beach and let the sun warm my skin, breathing deeply, feeling grounded. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Jay's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. When it buzzed again, I answered, not because I owed him, but because I was ready. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. "Please. We need to talk." "We can talk," I replied evenly. "But not today." Silence stretched between us. "I didn't realize," he finally said. "I didn't know how much you did for us." "That's the problem," I said gently. "You didn't want to know." He tried to apologize, words tumbling over each other, but they sounded hollow. Apologies without understanding were just noise. I told him we would speak again someday, but only if he was willing to listen instead of defend. That night, alone in the restaurant overlooking the water, I had dinner with a group of long-time staff members. We laughed, shared stories, and remembered how far we had come together. No one shouted. No one dismissed me. I wasn't invisible. As the days passed, the anger slowly loosened its grip. Not because what they had done was acceptable, but because carrying it no longer served me. I began to think about the future. Not theirs, but mine. About how I wanted to spend my time, who I wanted to surround myself with, what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. I updated my estate plans, directing funds toward scholarships for young women entering hospitality and business. I arranged mentorship programs within my company, wanting to be for others what I had never had myself. These decisions filled me with a quiet joy that surprised me. On my final morning at the resort, I stood once more at the grand entrance, watching guests arrive with hopeful faces. I remembered myself at their age, tired, determined, unsure if I would succeed but unwilling to quit. I smiled at the memory. I left coastal paradise not as a woman escaping pain, but as one stepping fully into her own life again. The betrayal had been devastating, yes, but it had also been clarifying. It had stripped away illusions I no longer needed. Somewhere along the way, I had taught my son how to survive. I had not taught him how to honor. That was a lesson he would have to learn on his own. As for me, I was done waiting for permission to matter. I returned home with fewer bags than I had arrived with, but I carried more clarity than I had in years. The drive back felt different. The road stretched ahead, familiar yet newly defined, as if I were seeing it with sharper eyes. I didn't turn on the radio. I let the quiet sit with me, not as emptiness, but as space. Space to think, to breathe, to finally listen to myself. The first week after the trip was harder than I expected. Not because I doubted my decision, but because grief has a way of arriving late. In the mornings, I would wake up with a strange sense of anticipation, then remember that my son was no longer part of my daily life. I grieved the relationship I thought we had, the future I had imagined where I would grow old surrounded by family who valued me. Accepting that this version of family no longer existed was a loss I had to face honestly. Jay called several times. I didn't answer at first. Not out of spite, but because I needed time to let my anger settle into something clearer. Eventually, I agreed to meet him, on my terms, in my space, with boundaries firmly in place. He arrived looking older somehow, the confidence he once borrowed from entitlement replaced by uncertainty. He sat across from me at my dining table, hands folded tightly, eyes darting around my penthouse as if seeing it for the first time. "I didn't know," he said quietly, "about any of it." "I believe you," I replied. "But ignorance doesn't erase harm." He tried to explain. Pressure. Marriage. Wanting to keep the peace. I listened without interrupting, not because his excuses held weight, but because I wanted to understand how a child I had raised with love had learned to trade dignity for convenience. "I failed you," he said finally. "Yes," I answered softly. "You did." The word hung between us, heavy but honest. I told him what I needed moving forward: respect, accountability, distance until trust could be rebuilt, if it ever could be. I made it clear that reconciliation was not guaranteed simply because he was my son. Love, I reminded him, was not immunity. Valentina never reached out. Not to apologize, not to explain. Her silence was its own answer. I heard through mutual acquaintances that the loss of financial support had been swift and jarring. Mortgage payments loomed. Credit cards filled. The lifestyle she had grown accustomed to unraveled quickly. I felt no satisfaction in that. Consequences didn't need witnesses. Instead, I focused on rebuilding myself. I immersed myself in my work, but differently this time. I no longer worked to prove anything. I worked because I loved it. I visited properties unannounced, spoke with staff, listened to their stories. I funded wellness programs, improved wages, expanded childcare benefits. Every decision felt intentional, aligned with the woman I had always been beneath the silence. I also made room for joy in smaller ways. Morning walks along the bay. Cooking meals just for myself. Joining a book club where no one knew my history, only my opinions. I formed friendships based on mutual respect, not obligation. Months passed. The sharp edges of pain softened into scars, still there, still part of me, but no longer bleeding. I stopped replaying the lobby scene in my mind. I stopped hearing Valentina's voice when I looked in the mirror. I began to see myself clearly again, a woman who had survived loss, built something lasting, and finally learned that self-worth was not negotiable. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter from Jay. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't make promises. He simply acknowledged the harm he had caused and the work he had yet to do. It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. I placed the letter in a drawer and closed it gently. Some doors reopen slowly. Some never do. As for my grandchildren, I held hope quietly. I sent birthday cards, small gifts, notes that told them they were loved without conditions. I didn't poison them against their parents. I refused to pass the pain forward. If they found their way back to me someday, I wanted them to find warmth, not bitterness. Looking back now, I understand that the moment Valentina shouted in that lobby was not the beginning of my humiliation. It was the end of my denial. It forced me to see the truth I had been avoiding, that love without respect is not love at all. I no longer confuse loneliness with being alone. I no longer mistake silence for peace. And I no longer apologize for taking up space in a world I helped build. There are women everywhere who carry families on their backs while being told they are a burden. Mothers who give until they disappear. Grandmothers who are rewritten as servants, as fools, as obstacles to other people's comfort. This story is not unique. That is what makes it important. If you see yourself in these words, know this: you are not invisible unless you choose to be. Your life has value beyond what others extract from it. And it is never too late to reclaim your voice. I learned that lesson late, but I learned it fully. And that changed everything.